What's up, all you cool kids? This is Daisy Collins of TsunamiRose.net coming at you with this tutorial on how I made this pink Christmas Shabby Chic cover that you can create and use with any technique of junk journal that would require a fabric cover. And if you guys are interested in junk journal tutorials and videos, I do pretty much post a new junk journal video every single day here on my channel. So if that's what you're into, please don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button. So for this project, what you're going to need is a piece of foundation fabric that is larger than your end project. So if you need a margin around your project, you want to make sure your foundation fabric takes that into account. I usually make my pieces pretty much as large as I can. I normally make my junk journal cover pieces before they even end up on my junk journal. I make them all 18 by 12 inches, which is the same size as my cutting board, just to make things easier. I really don't need that much, but just to keep things on the safe side. Also, and it could be any kind of quality fabric. This is actually the cheapest fabric that I could get at Walmart by the yard. As you can see, is entirely see-through. What you do want to keep in mind though is if you have sheer or opaque fabrics. For sheer fabrics, you want to use a white foundation fabric because it'll show through, right? And if you have more fabrics that are completely opaque, that are not see-through whatsoever, you can use any kind of fabric that you want. I am using a mix of sheer and opaque fabric, so I'm going to use a white foundation fabric. Also, what you're going to need are, of course, the strips of fabric. I went ahead and ripped mine apart to kind of give it a more shabby chic, more rustic look. Also more textured, but you could also use your rotary cutter if that's easier for you, or if that's already what you have laying around. The strips should be 6 inches, no longer than 6 inches, so you get a nice variety of fabrics on your cover. Also, the width, I would probably not do anything less than 3/4 inch, and probably nothing more than 1 inch. But you could use a mix of widths, so do keep that in mind. You could also use all the same width, so it's really up to you. For me and for this cover, I'm going to use a variety of widths. Some are going to be a lot wider than others, and also what you can keep in mind is you can pre-plan kind of the order that they all go in. If you want them all to go, like if you have 5 different fabrics and you want to keep repeating those fabrics, you can pre-plan that. Also, what I did with my particular pink Christmas cover is that I pre-planned certain fabrics. Like this fabric on the black background, to me was slightly more striking, so I did want to make sure and distribute that kind of very strategically throughout the cover, so that way it kind of was scattered nice and evenly throughout. But also it could be completely random, so that is up to you and your theme. And of course you can use different colored fabrics that fit your junk journal. Sorry about my cat crying. Okay, so here we are at my sewing machine, and I can tell you the settings that I'm using, though for yourself you might want to use something different. I have my sewing machine set to a zigzag stitch. My setting is 3 inch length. I'm sorry, not 3 inch. 3 length and 6 width, in case you wanted to know. So I'm using a nice wide zigzag stitch. I'm placing my first strip of fabric here on the very corner. Doesn't really matter what corner you start with, but I always start off with what would this be, the top left hand corner. Okay, so I place my fabric right on top, right on the very corner. You could even move it off a little bit so that way you have some to trim off. And what I'm going to do is, like I said, I'm going to use zigzag stitch, and I'm going to zigzag stitch down the middle of the strip. And then when I get to the end of this, I'm going to place down another strip. So let's do this. And I'm using a a red thread for this. For the next step, I'm going to be using a black thread. And you can either do that, or you could choose to follow that, or you can choose to follow whatever color setup you're trying to do. So now I'm going to set the next strip up against the edge of the fabric here. And I'm going to move my needle to the middle of this strip now. I'm going to lay it just slightly on top of the last strip. And again, up against the edge here. And just making sure that the edge here. So it doesn't really matter what the next size strip is going to be. You're going to set your needle to the middle of it. So again, here I'm going to set it up against the edge of the fabric. Trying to overlap it a little bit. Of course, it doesn't have to be like dead on in the middle or anything like that. It's not that serious. Not that serious, y'all. Okay, so here's my next strip. Laying it down up against the edge. And then we'll move my needle to wherever the middle of this strip is. Last piece for this row, and I think I did every 3 strips for this one. Like I said, I'm strategically placing this fabric here, this black fabric with the pink flowers. So that's the only thing I'm really keeping an eye on. Everything else I'm kind of just repeating the fabrics over and over, and I will stagger them so that way the next strip doesn't just start with the next fabric, it actually starts with the one that's offset. Of course, you're not going to sew right in the middle if you're not really comfortable with moving the needle or anything. We're going to go over how to actually secure. So you're going to see all our fabrics are kind of, like I said, just sewn in the middle, so they're kind of flapping around. We'll secure them in the next step. For now, I'm just going to continue to place the fabrics and sew down the middle. You do want to make sure and overlap over the last strip. So right here you see there's going to be a little strip of the white foundation fabric there showing, and I'll show you how to deal with that. So again, I'm just going to overlay the next strip here over this red fabric. Which is the one before. Again, I'm gonna go ahead and we're gonna look over these holes right here. So just making sure it overlaps. Okay, so when you're finished sewing down all of your strips on your whole sheet, your whole fabric, foundation fabric, what you're gonna wanna do is look and see if you can find any naked spots. So right here, there's a spot where the fabric, just right here, this little tiny spot, there's a spot where the fabric was not covered. There's also a spot over here that has the foundation fabric showing. And so what we want to do is we want to fill in those holes where the fabric is showing. Other than those 2 spots, actually, this is, I think, pretty good. Also, what you could do is, say you notice, like I noticed that this cover here has like a lot of red off here to the left, but then over here, like this whole part right here, there's no red. So I kind of want to make like a little red patch as it is. So that's what we're going to be doing in this step right here. This is obviously optional if you did a good job in distributing your fabrics. Maybe you don't need to do this step. I'm going to put one like right here, just like a little red patch, so it kind of adds some of that to the pattern. I think I'm going to add a red patch right here as well. And I think that will kind of distribute, maybe the patch I put up here I'll also do in red, because it kind of does distribute the red a little bit better than how I had originally done it. So here I'm going to sew this little patch right here. And then I want to put a patch of red over here. And I think I'll be happy with that. So I'm going to go ahead and sew them. And I do just go ahead and sew them on top. Just with the zigzag stitch, same thing, nothing has really changed. Got to figure out what I'm going to put there. But for now, let me just put down these little patches that I said. Right here is a naked piece of fabric, so I do need to cover that up. Let's get my sewing machine here. And here we go. Okay, so we're back on the sewing machine. Still have red thread, red bobbin. And like I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that the bottom fabric is on top of the first row. So you just want to make sure your fabric is on top, the bottom one, the bottom row. So here I'm going to add this little patch here to cover up that little naked spot. Again, just going to zigzag down the middle. Okay, so now that I've put my patches down, now that there's no like naked pieces of fabric, what we're going to do is we are going to sew all of these edges down. So basically this fabric has just a bunch of little strips of paper sewed down the middle. So now we have to sew the edges down so my fabric acts as one. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to turn all these little scraps of fabric into one piece of fabric. So now that we've sewed them all down, we are going to just sew right across. Make sure all these edges are down. This step is really not like pretty. It doesn't have to be perfect. It can be messy, but we do need to make sure all these edges are down and then no fabric comes loose like that. So the first step to doing that is to make sure, like I said before, the last step, that your bottom row, right here I've actually sewn it together, but you want to make sure that your bottom row is on top of the row before it. Sometimes like right here I sewed this fabric down, so what you want to do in that case is just make sure that the fabric is, then we switch it around and that top row is going to be what we tuck in the bottom row into. But ideally you would want to tuck in the bottom row, but it happens. So I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that that fabric is on top. And we're going to head to the sewing machine. Okay, so now we're back at my sewing machine, and like I said, we're going to try and sew down all the edges. What you want to do is you want to try and sew as close to the edge as you possibly can. I'm using a straight stitch, and we're using default settings. Just kind of sew all the way across. Doesn't have to be straight, could move around, it's totally cool. We might even have to go on top of that again, because if this part right here flips down and exposes the foundation fabric, then you want to make sure to sew that down. Here I sewed really, really close to the foundation, so I don't need to correct myself. I am good as it seems. So now, like I said, I'm going to go ahead and sew the next row, but I do want to make sure that the fabric is tucked either underneath or on top of the layer before it. And you do want to pay attention to this, because sometimes the fabric isn't the right way. And I mean, if it's not the right way, you can just go back and sew it down again. This just kind of makes it easier to sew on. So let's go ahead and do that to the whole quilt. I'll show you how I do the first couple of rows. You do want to move around as the edges kind of, some of them are shorter, some of them are longer, so you want to move around with that. So that's what I'm saying, nothing has to be straight. Let me do the next row for y'all. So let's see. We're going to have to go back in here and sew even closer to this edge, because if you can lift this edge up and your bottom row comes out, then you did not sew on it, and we'll just go back and make sure we catch it this time. So let me just go back one more time. Right here. This is also, so we got to get a lot closer to the edge there. So let's do that. Let's try and get a lot closer to that edge. Oops. Okay, so I have now sewn down all the edges as best as I can. There is a little test that we can do, so we make sure that this is all basically one piece of fabric. What we can do is we can start to roll the fabric like this, kind of like just in half, and kind of keep turning it. So if you see any edges that stick out, like right here, that edge sticks out, but it's really, really small, you want to make sure and kind of think about it like, there's a tiny little edge right here. I couldn't sew that down. So I keep turning and I keep turning, and like that's too small to turn down, or to sew down. So you just keep doing that. Like right here, this piece right here, you could probably sew that down. So let me go ahead and sew that down. This is one way to kind of see if it's one piece of fabric. And the stitching for this is all sorts of messy. It's not perfect. Nothing is really straight. And on the back, it's even messier. So if the back of your project looks like this, a big old mess, then you are good. You did it right. I accidentally even sewed on a piece of fabric. I don't even know how that happened. So again, you want to make sure that it all kind of works as one fabric. If you see exposed the foundation fabric, you definitely want to add a strip there. So here it looks like I need a strip of some sort, and I'm trying to look at what I have, and something just skinny, skinny, skinny. And I'm going to go ahead and, that was right there. That is the smallest little strip of foundation fabric, but I don't like it. So I'm going to go ahead and sew a patch right here, so that way that doesn't happen with that foundation fabric. And then after that, I'm pretty much done because it's all nice and laid down. What you do want to do is you want to cut all of your threads. You want to cut all of your threads as you go along. Otherwise, that does get to be a big old mess, and so you definitely want to get your threads down. Cut off. And yeah, that's pretty much the whole project, you guys. And you use this piece of fabric as you would with any junk journal project that calls for fabric. This basically will act as that for whatever method you want to try to make your journal. So you guys, that is it for me for this junk journal tutorial. I do want to thank everybody for watching it, and if you did find it helpful, please leave me a comment below. Let me know if you're going to try it out. If you do, I do have a Facebook group. You can share that with us. Or yeah, I just appreciate y'all checking out my channel. If you do need junk journal printables, you can check out my shop at TsunamiRose.net. Thank you guys so much for your attention, and I will see y'all live here on my channel. I go live at 10 p.m. Pacific Standard Time most nights of the week. Okay, you guys, thank you so much. Bye.